There is a man sitting in a diner right now. Corner table, back to the wall. He got there 8 minutes early. He did not think about why he chose that seat. The body chose it. He ordered coffee black, not because he particularly likes black coffee, but because he has been drinking it that way since the army stopped giving him options. He lives alone. The apartment is clean in a specific way. Not the clean of someone who tidied up before company came, but the clean of someone who cannot sleep if the dishes are in the sink. The bed is made every morning before 0600, corners pulled tight the way nobody outside the service bothers doing anymore. There is a place for the keys, a place for the mail, a system for every object in that kitchen. Order is not a preference for this man. It is a survival response so old he cannot remember learning it. The name does not matter. The face belongs to hundreds of thousands of men scattered across this country. Veterans who separated from service months ago or 2 decades ago. Men who move through quiet days with precision, who call themselves fine and mostly mean it and sometimes do not. My name is Jack. I wore a uniform long enough to understand something about the man in that corner seat. What I want to walk through is something that almost never gets said in plain language. The psychology of the veteran who lives alone. Not because it is a crisis, because it is a reality. And realities deserve honest words. According to the Department of Veterans Affairs, veterans are measurably more likely to live alone than non-veterans of the same age, and that gap widens after 50. There are roughly 18 million veterans in the United States. Best estimates put around 7 million of them in solo households. That is not a small number. That is a city. A city of men who came home to houses that were quiet in ways they had not fully prepared for. There is more than one road to this address. Some men never married, not because service made them opposed to it, but because service made it structurally near impossible for years. Assignments moved them across 4 time zones. Deployments ran back to back. Relationships that started with real intention did not always survive 6 months of silence, followed by a man who came home different than the one who left. By 40 or 45, the habit of operating solo had run so deep it no longer felt like a habit. It felt like just how things worked. Some men were married for a long time and it ended. The divorce rate among veterans runs higher than the general population, and the reasons are not complicated. Deployment strains a family in ways the homecoming does not automatically fix. The man who returns from a long tour is not quite the man who left. He is quieter in some ways and louder in others. He positions himself in restaurants with his back against walls. He cannot sleep through the 4th of July. He struggles to explain to his wife why he cannot quite be present at a dinner table full of noise. Some marriages absorb all of that and hold. Many do not. When the marriage ends, what collapses is not just the relationship. The entire social infrastructure built around that relationship collapses with it. She was the one who remembered his brother's birthday. She maintained the friendships, kept the calendar, made sure the holidays happened. Without her, the network quietly dissolves, and he does not fully notice until one day it occurs to him that he has not had a meaningful conversation with another human being in 3 weeks. Some men lost a partner to illness, or accident, or the simple brutal math of a long life. They had everything a person could ask for, and then it was gone. Of all the silences a veteran carries, that particular one does not fade on any schedule he can predict. Here is what gets missed in most conversations about veterans who live alone. The assumption is that this looks like other kinds of solitude. It does not. The civilian who lives alone often lacks structure. The veteran who lives alone has too much of it, structure that holds him together and also keeps everything at a precise, measured distance. Veterans in this situation tend to run what looks, from the outside, like an admirably disciplined life. The alarm fires at the same time every morning. Workouts happen before sunrise, because that is when the body expects them. Meals run on a schedule. The truck gets maintained on a calendar. Bills are paid the day they arrive. Everything has a system, and the system runs without requiring anyone else. That system is doing more than one job. Inside the service, the day had purpose built into the structure itself. There was a mission, a unit, a role, a chain of accountability that connected every man to every other man around him. A veteran knew what the day was for. He knew who he was in relation to every person in his world. When that structure came down, when the discharge papers got signed and the uniform went into storage, what left with it was not just the job. It was the identity that lived inside the job. Researchers who study post-military adjustment have documented this pattern consistently. Veterans who describe themselves as highly organized, in the years following separation, are frequently managing what psychologists call identity transition grief, the particular loss that comes from having a total role removed without a direct replacement. The made bed and the Aero 500 alarm are not just habits from a previous life. They are the last structures standing from a self the man has not found another way to hold. The routine is standing in for something larger, and most of the men running it would be the last to say so. There are things the man in that corner seat does that he has probably never stopped to examine. He always sits where he can see the door, in restaurants, in waiting rooms, in other people's living rooms. The positioning is automatic. He could not easily stop doing it, even if someone pointed it out. He notices exits before he notices decor. Walking into any new space, the brain catalogues the layout and the egress points before it registers anything else. This is not paranoia. It is trained perception that never received the update that the threat environment had changed. He carries very little. A man who lived out of a rucksack for years does not accumulate easily. The apartment is not sparse because he cannot afford more. It is sparse because he learned practically and under pressure that objects complicate movement, and some part of him never fully unlearned that. He says he is fine before the question is finished. Not because he is lying, because that answer was the correct answer in every context that mattered for so long that it stopped being a choice. It became a default. The body produces it before the brain has time to check whether it is still true. He can sit in silence for long periods in a way that unnerves people who are not used to it. Civilian conversation tends to feel quiet because quiet is uncomfortable. The veteran who lived in environments where silence meant something important developed a different relationship with it. The quiet apartment does not disturb him, but on certain evenings, certain specific evenings that tend to arrive in late November or the middle of the night, that silence says something to him that he has not fully figured out how to answer. This is the part most people miss, even the people who are trying their hardest to understand. When someone describes a veteran as lonely, the image that comes to mind is the civilian version. No friends, no social life, cut off. That is rarely what this actually is. The veteran who lives alone usually has people. He has 3 or 5 men he has known since the service, sometimes for 20 or 30 years. He knows their kids' names. He was at the wedding or would have been. These are not acquaintances. These are the men who saw him in conditions where no performance was possible, exhausted, afraid, running on nothing, holding on anyway. And they are still in his life. But he does not call them. He waits for a reason to call. A birthday, a significant event, a logistical question. The calls happen every few months and are good when they happen. Between them, the connection runs on memory more than maintenance. The wire thins without anyone deciding to thin it. This is the specific architecture of how military friendships are built. They are built for intensity and proximity. They require no explanation and no small talk, because both men are already operating inside the same set of shared references. But that architecture was never designed for the kind of low-stakes, sustaining contact, the brief check-in, the message sent with no particular reason, that keeps a connection alive across years and miles. Inside the service, proximity handled the maintenance automatically. At 0600, the same men. At noon, the same men. At lights out, the same men. The relationship did not require tending because it was never more than 30 feet away. Now those men are in 3 different states. And the friendship that required no effort when it had no distance now requires a kind of effort that feels strange to initiate. Not because the desire is not there, but because nobody ever taught this man how to reach across that distance without a reason. Veteran service organizations and VA social workers have documented this pattern in health studies. Going back to the early 2000s, the friendships exist. The maintenance does not. And over time, a friendship without maintenance quietly becomes a memory of a friendship, which is a different thing entirely. On a Sunday morning in November, when the coffee is right and there are no obligations and the game is on, the veteran who lives alone would not trade a single detail of his life, his space, his rules, his silence, the thermostat set exactly where he put it. Nobody disappointed in him at the moment, and he is not disappointed in anyone else. There is a real peace inside a life organized entirely around one person's preferences. It is not a performance of contentment. On those mornings, it is actual contentment. Then there is the other side, a health scare with no one in the waiting room. Not nobody who cares, nobody who is physically present, which is a different and specific kind of alone. Thanksgiving with a plate that takes 15 minutes to prepare for one person, when a meal that size used to take the whole afternoon because the table needed more chairs. The night at 0200 when sleep will not come, and the mind runs through the inventory. A decision made in the field, a face that did not make it home. Something that happened once that does not have a civilian equivalent, and there is no one in the building who knows what any of it looked like. That is where the distance between being alone and feeling alone lives. And the man who spent years being the most reliable presence in every room he walked into does not reach for the phone in that moment. That is not how this was assembled. Multiple studies conducted in partnership with the VA have found that veterans over 50 report loneliness at rates significantly above the general population, with the sharpest numbers clustering in the late 50s and early 60s. These are men who look from the outside exactly like they have it together. Clean apartment, structured days, calm in conversation, not asking anyone for anything. That is not evidence that nothing is heavy. That is evidence of a very long training in carrying things without letting the weight show. Here is what does not change at the end of the day. The man at the corner table leaves an exact tip. He scans the parking lot once before he pulls out. He drives home in the center lane, consistent speed, both hands on the wheel. The apartment is quiet when he gets back. Keys go in the designated place. Coffee gets made. He sits in the chair that faces the door. He handled the day. He handles every day. That is what he was built for, and he is very good at it. But there is a question worth sitting with. Not out loud necessarily. Just inside, where the 0200 inventory runs its course, is the man who handles everything the same as the man who is okay. Sometimes, not always. That distinction is paper thin. And the only person who can see it clearly is the man himself. If there is a name in the phone, someone from the unit, someone who has not been called in 8 months or 18, that call does not need a reason. It does not need an agenda or a problem to justify it. Sometimes a call is just a call, and sometimes the man on the other end has been sitting in the same chair, running the same inventory, waiting for the same reason to pick up. One call, that is it.